Picture this. You are stranded, desperate, and relying on that golden repository of human wisdom known as common sense to save your precious skin. It is a deeply comforting thought, isn't it? The idea that pop culture, Hollywood blockbusters, and campfire Boy Scout tales have subtly equipped your modern brain with the primal instincts needed to conquer Mother Nature. Except, it is a lie. A massive, culturally reinforced, historically dangerous lie. In the theatre of wilderness survival, logic is a terrible bodyguard. The things we know to be true are often the exact, beautifully packaged traps that seal our fate. Today, we are dismantling the first few of 42 deeply ingrained survival myths that are, in reality, execution sentences wrapped in good intentions. We will strip away the cinematic bravado, tear down the comforting falsehoods, and unlearn everything you think keeps you breathing. Because out past the safety of the neon lights, nature does not grade on a curve, and ignorance is the quickest route to an entry in the local coroner's ledger. Let us begin in the deep woods with myth number 1, the absolute blanket rule of playing dead during a bear attack. It sounds beautifully simple, doesn't it? A universal cheat code for apex predators. Just drop to the damp forest floor, curl into a tight little ball, protect your neck, and wait for the giant beast to lose interest. But treating all bears like they read the exact same lifestyle manual is a lethal mistake. This passive tactic belongs strictly to the domain of Ursus arctos horribilis, the grizzly bear. Grizzlies are notoriously defensive, hot-tempered creatures. When a grizzly charges, it is usually because you have accidentally threatened its cubs, its food cache, or its personal space. By dropping to the ground and playing dead, you are signaling absolute surrender. You are letting the grizzly know that the threat has been successfully neutralized, satisfying its defensive urge so it can lumber away. But try that exact same passive trick with a standard black bear, Ursus americanus, and you are not de-escalating a tense standoff. You are simply presenting yourself as a stationary, pre-packaged, zero-effort buffet. Black bears rarely attack out of defense. When they target a human, their intent is almost universally predatory. They are not trying to scare you out of their backyard. They are actively hunting for calories. If you lie down and play dead for a predatory black bear, it will not sniff you and walk away. It will simply begin eating you. The modern scientific consensus is absolute. Stand your ground against a black bear. Make yourself look as massive as humanly possible. Wave your arms wildly, scream at the top of your lungs, bang metal pots together, and if it makes physical contact, fight back with every single ounce of unhinged violence you possess. Aim directly for the sensitive nose and the eyes. In the deep woods, misidentifying a silhouette or misapplying a rulebook means the difference between a thrilling campfire story and a permanent residence in a mid-century graveyard. Next, we journey to the scorching, hallucinogenic heat of the American Southwest for myth number 2, the miraculous oasis of the desert cactus. You are out of water. Your tongue feels like sandpaper, your skin is blistered, and a majestic, multi-armed saguaro cactus stands before you like a giant, green, prickly hydration station. We have all seen it in classic westerns and Sunday morning cartoons. You simply slice the top off with a machete, scoop out the refreshing, cool water inside, and happily survive to tell the tale. Try this in real life, and you will dramatically accelerate your own demise. Cacti do not store pure, crystal-clear water. Instead, they store a thick, highly complex, viscous white sap that is heavily loaded with toxic chemical compounds known as alkaloids. This fluid is intensely bitter and extremely alkaline, specifically engineered by natural selection to prevent thirsty desert animals from chewing through the plant's moisture reserves. Drinking this toxic slush acts as an immediate emetic on the human body. It triggers severe abdominal cramping, agonizing internal spasms, and violent, uncontrollable vomiting. In a desert survival scenario, vomiting is an absolute death sentence. It instantly expels whatever precious, true hydration your body had left in its system, sending your core temperature skyrocketing into the danger zone and accelerating fatal dehydration at a terrifying velocity. While survival manuals point to one highly specific exception, the fishhook barrel cactus, which yields a marginally tolerable fluid, even that process requires immense caloric energy to harvest. In the real desert, your best bet is seeking shade and conserving your sweat, not waging a losing chemical war against toxic desert flora. Finally, we confront the ultimate cinematic gold standard of wilderness medicine. Myth number 3. Slicing open a snakebite and heroically sucking out the venom. It looks magnificent on the silver screen, the brave companion leaning down, using their mouth to draw out the poison, saving their friend's life just in the nick of time. In reality, it is a catastrophic failure of basic human physics and anatomy. When a pit viper strikes, its hollow fangs act exactly like high-pressure hypodermic needles, injecting a complex cocktail of proteins deep into the subcutaneous tissue and muscle layers. Human mouth suction cannot generate anywhere near the negative pressure required to extract fluid once it has been deeply embedded in these pressurized tissue networks. Clinical studies show that mouth suction extracts less than 2% of the injected venom. What you do successfully achieve, however, is a biological disaster. You introduce a massive wave of destructive oral bacteria from your mouth directly into a fresh, deeply vulnerable, bleeding puncture wound, drastically increasing the risk of severe, tissue-destroying necrosis and secondary infections. Worse yet, the mechanical suction causes localized capillary damage, breaking down the tiny blood vessels surrounding the bite and actually accelerating the venom's travel into your deeper bloodstream. Commercial snakebite kits equipped with plastic suction cups are equally useless and destructive, often causing localized skin death. The modern medical mandate is simple, stark, and uncinematic. Keep the patient completely still. Immobilize the wounded limb below the level of the heart to slow down systemic circulation, and get to a proper hospital for antivenom. Leave the mouth-to-wound heroics entirely in Hollywood. Let us venture deeper into the tangled shadows of the wilderness for Part 2, where the errors of judgment grow exponentially more severe, and the environment becomes an unforgiving executioner of the ill-informed. We begin with myth number 4, the rugged, telegenic urge to consume raw meat and fish the second you manage to trap or catch it. We have all watched the charismatic television survival gurus dive teeth first into a squirming, raw river fish or take a savage bite out of an uncooked animal carcass, framing it as the ultimate display of primal dominance. In the cold reality of the wild, this is a fast track to severe gastrointestinal mutiny. Wild animals are walking biological repositories for a horrifying array of parasites, protozoa, and lethal bacteria, including roundworms, flukes, Salmonella, and Escherichia coli. When you ingest flesh that hasn't been subjected to the purifying heat of a fire, you are intentionally introducing these pathogens into an already stressed, compromised human system. Within hours, the onset of severe bacterial infection or parasitic overload triggers debilitating diarrhea, explosive vomiting, and acute abdominal incapacitation. Furthermore, the human digestive tract expels an immense amount of metabolic energy attempting to break down dense, raw, complex proteins and fibrous tissues. In a high-stress survival situation where your caloric bank account is already dangerously overdrawn, forcing your body to divert its dwindling resources to process contaminated raw meat actually results in a net energy loss, all while inducing profound dehydration through fluid loss. Cook your food thoroughly or do not eat it at all. Your caveman fantasies will only guarantee an agonizing demise. Moving from the culinary traps to the flawed compasses of the forest, we encounter myth number 5, the ancient, grandfatherly lore that moss grows exclusively on the north side of trees. It sounds like a beautifully dependable piece of natural navigation, a green arrow painted by Mother Nature herself to guide lost wanderers back to safety. Unfortunately, moss is not a licensed cartographer. It is an opportunistic bryophyte that requires exactly two things to thrive: moisture and shade. While it is true that in the northern hemisphere, the southern exposure receives more direct, drying sunlight, leaving the northern side marginally cooler and wetter, this rule is completely invalidated the moment you step into a dense forest canopy. In a real woodland environment, local topography, neighboring trees, hillsides, and regional wind patterns create a highly complex tapestry of microclimates. If a tree sits near a rushing stream, or if a dense overhead canopy blocks out the sun from the east or west, moss will happily blanket every single square inch of that bark, completely encircling the trunk. Relying on this myth to navigate a straight line out of the woods will inevitably send you walking in erratic, dizzying circles until you succumb to exhaustion and exposure. If you do find yourself stranded as night falls, you might be tempted by myth number 6, seeking shelter in a deep cave and building a massive, roaring campfire inside to keep the cold at bay. It feels like the ultimate primordial sanctuary, a stone fortress protected from the wind with a crackling hearth to keep you warm. In truth, you are building a highly efficient subterranean crematorium. The first and most immediate hazard is atmospheric. Carbon monoxide is a colorless, odorless, and completely tasteless gas that is a natural byproduct of incomplete combustion. Inside the semi-enclosed or poorly ventilated chamber of a cave, this toxic gas rapidly displaces oxygen, quietly suffocating you in your sleep before you even realize you are in danger. But even if the smoke manages to find a drafting exit, a far more violent physics engine is at play: thermal expansion. The intense, concentrated heat from your campfire will rapidly bake the solid rock ceiling directly above it. As stone heats up, it expands unevenly, creating massive internal stresses within the geological strata. This structural disruption can trigger a catastrophic phenomenon known as spalling, where large, heavy slabs of solid rock fracture violently and collapse directly onto your head, trapping or crushing you instantly under tons of unyielding stone. Keep your fires outside the cave entrance, using the stone wall strictly to reflect the heat inward, rather than baking yourself alive. Should your survival misadventures carry you out of the woods and into the coastal waters, you must watch out for myth number 7, the classic macho advice to punch an attacking shark directly in the nose. It is a cinematic trope that has been passed around bars and docks for generations, suggesting that a swift, watery left hook to the snout will instantly stun the ocean's apex predator and send it swimming away in shame. Mechanically speaking, trying to execute a high-velocity, high-impact punch underwater is a physical impossibility due to fluid resistance, which dramatically slows your fist down before it ever makes contact. Furthermore, a shark's nose is positioned directly above a mouth lined with hundreds of razor-sharp serrated teeth. A misplaced punch or a slight deviation in your aim means you are effectively shoving your hand and arm directly into a meat grinder. Biologists who study these ancient predators know that the snout is relatively dense and cartilage-backed, making it a poor target. If you are forced to fight for your life against a shark, you must target its true structural vulnerabilities: the eyes and the gills. The eyes are highly sensitive, soft tissue targets, and the gills are delicate, exposed respiratory organs packed with nerve endings. Ripping, gouging, or clawing at these areas disrupts the shark's sensory array and inflicts genuine pain, which is the only reliable way to convince the predator that you are far more trouble than you are worth as a meal. Returning to land, let us brave the frozen wilderness to dismantle myth number 8: eating snow directly from the ground to stay hydrated. It seems logical enough. Snow is merely frozen water, so scooping up a handful of clean white powder should quench your thirst and stave off dehydration. However, this is a profound violation of human thermodynamic law. Your body must maintain a core temperature of approximately 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit to survive. When you ingest solid snow, your stomach is forced to act as a furnace, burning precious, finite caloric energy to melt that ice into a liquid state and heat it up to body temperature. This massive expenditure of metabolic heat causes your internal core temperature to plunge rapidly, accelerating the onset of clinical hypothermia, which impairs judgment and induces fatal lethargy. Furthermore, the light, airy structure of snow means it is mostly air. To get a single cup of liquid water, you would need to consume an immense, body-chilling volume of powder, destroying your internal thermostat for a negligible hydration return. Always melt your snow using an external heat source, like a fire or a stove, before drinking it, or compress it into water inside a container wrapped in your outer clothing layers, where residual body heat can work slowly without shocking your core. If the cold has already gripped your limbs, you must avoid myth number 9, rubbing frostbitten skin vigorously or using scalding hot water to thaw it out. It is a common, well-intentioned mistake to see pale, frozen fingers and assume that friction or an immediate blast of intense heat will jump-start the circulation and restore life to the tissue. In reality, you're inflicting catastrophic, permanent mechanical damage on a cellular level. When skin freezes, tiny, razor-sharp ice crystals form within the intercellular fluid, piercing the delicate cell membranes. When you aggressively rub or massage frostbitten skin, you are effectively grinding those microscopic ice shards directly through the surviving cells, shredding the remaining tissue architecture and guaranteeing severe, irreversible necrosis that often necessitates amputation. Similarly, because frostbitten skin is completely numb, plunging it into hot water will instantly cause severe thermal burns without the victim even feeling it, destroying the fragile, compromised blood vessels beneath. The proper medical protocol requires slow, passive, controlled re-warming using lukewarm water, around 100 to 104 degrees Fahrenheit, or utilizing gentle, ambient body-to-body contact, allowing the frozen cells to thaw naturally without structural trauma. Finally, we confront the ultimate macro-navigational error, myth number 10, finding a river or a stream and immediately following it downstream to find civilization. This is standard advice in many outdated survival guides, operating under the assumption that all water eventually flows toward human settlements, towns, or roads. While this may hold true over hundreds of miles, executing this strategy blindly in a short-term survival crisis is an incredibly perilous gamble. Rushing water naturally seeks the path of least resistance, carving its way through the most violent, rugged, and impassable terrain imaginable. By following a riverbank, you will inevitably find yourself funneled directly into dense, impenetrable thickets, precipitous slot canyons, and sheer vertical waterfalls that you cannot safely descend. Furthermore, downstream lowlands are the primary collection points for immense, impassable swamps and treacherous bogs, where foot travel becomes an exhausting, hypothermic quagmire, completely isolating you from high-ground visibility where rescue crews could spot you. Instead of walking into a geographical trap, your best course of action is to stay put near your initial point of separation, seek high ground to assess the terrain, and allow search teams to locate you along your intended route. We move now into the volatile realm of atmospheric chaos and environmental panic for Part 3, where Mother Nature displays her most violent tantrums and humanity responds with some of its most spectacular delusions. We begin under the darkened, twisting skies of the American Midwest with myth number 11, the widespread, deeply suicidal urge to seek shelter under a highway overpass or concrete bridge during a tornado. It seems like a perfectly logical, fortress-like sanctuary, a massive structure of steel and reinforced concrete engineered to withstand thousands of tons of pressure. Millions of drivers have abandoned their vehicles during a storm to climb up the grassy embankments, wedging themselves into the narrow girders above. In doing so, they are stepping directly into a deadly physical trap dictated by fluid dynamics. A tornado passing over a narrow underpass creates a classic Venturi effect, named after the pioneering physicist Giovanni Battista Venturi. When a massive volume of air is forced through a constricted opening, its velocity must increase exponentially to maintain mass flow continuity, while the air pressure drops precipitously. The overpass transforms instantly from a shield into a high-speed wind tunnel. Wind speeds that might be clocked at 150 miles per hour on the open road can easily accelerate to well over 200 miles per hour beneath the bridge. This hyper-accelerated gale acts like a giant atmospheric vacuum cleaner, generating powerful aerodynamic suction that tears human bodies cleanly out of the girders and hurls them into the debris cloud. Furthermore, this tunnel becomes a high-velocity shooting gallery for airborne shrapnel, where twisted sheet metal, shattered glass, and splintered wood are funneled directly at anyone exposed on the embankment. If you are caught on the highway during a twister, your vehicle is safer than a bridge. If abandonment is necessary, your absolute best bet is finding a low-lying, ditch-like depression away from the road, lying flat and covering your head. As the storm rages on, we run headfirst into myth number 12, the comforting age-old adage that lightning never strikes the same place twice. It is a phrase woven deeply into our cultural vernacular, used to reassure the nervous that once an electrical discharge has scorched a particular patch of earth, the danger has permanently passed. In the strict realm of electrostatics, this is absolute nonsense. Lightning is nothing more than a giant, unnuanced electrical circuit seeking the path of least resistance between a highly charged storm cloud and the ground. The earth below is filled with sharp topographic features, metallic conductors, and towering structures that shorten the distance the electrical current must travel through the insulating air. Once a specific pathway is established and ionized, it actually becomes highly conductive, making it an ideal target for subsequent discharges. Consider the empirical data. The Empire State Building in New York City is struck by lightning an average of 25 times every single year, and during severe electrical storms, it has been recorded taking multiple direct hits within a span of just a few minutes. Natural features like isolated mountain peaks, tall oak trees, and radio towers suffer the exact same repetitive bombardment. Believing that a freshly scorched patch of earth or a recently struck tree is a safe zone during an ongoing electrical storm is a fast way to get fried by a secondary strike. Lightning has no memory, no remorse, and an infinite capacity for repetition. If we escape the lightning and head toward the coast, we must confront the structural madness of myth number 13, opening all the windows in your house during a hurricane to equalize the internal atmospheric pressure. This piece of architectural folklore suggests that the extreme low pressure at the center of a tropical cyclone will cause a tightly sealed house to explode from the inside out, much like a deep-sea fish brought too quickly to the surface. Acting on this myth is equivalent to signing a demolition order for your own roof. Modern engineering has proven that houses do not explode from hurricane pressure differentials. The natural ventilation and minor gaps in construction are more than enough to equalize pressure naturally. By intentionally opening your windows on the windward side of the house, you are allowing a torrent of high-velocity, multi-ton atmospheric force directly inside the building. Once this massive volume of wind enters the enclosed space, it looks for an exit, pressing upward against the ceiling. This creates a severe aerodynamic lift scenario, which works in perfect destructive tandem with the low pressure passing over the top of your roof outside. The house effectively becomes an airplane wing. The pressure from within pushes up, the wind outside pulls up, and the entire roof structure is ripped completely off the foundation walls. Once the roof fails, the structural integrity of the walls collapses entirely, leaving you exposed to the full, unfettered fury of the storm. Keep your windows shut tight, board them up with heavy plywood, and let the exterior aerodynamics work as they were engineered to. Should you survive the hurricane only to find yourself wandering the humid, muddy bayous of the deep south, you must ignore myth number 14, the ridiculous directive to run in a sharp, frantic zigzag pattern to escape a chasing alligator. This myth is built on the false premise that alligators are agile, persistent pursuit predators on land, but possess a turning radius so poor that a zigzagging human can easily outmaneuver them. Let us consult basic reptilian biology. Alligators are ambush predators. Their entire hunting strategy relies on explosive, short-range lunges from the water's edge. On dry land, they are notoriously lazy and incredibly inefficient runners over distance. While a large alligator can achieve a surprisingly fast top speed of around 10 to 11 miles per hour in a straight line, they can only maintain this high-velocity sprint for a matter of a few yards before their anaerobic metabolism fails, causing their muscles to fill with lactic acid and forcing them to stop and rest. By running in a frantic, exhausting zigzag pattern, you are actually slowing your own forward progress down dramatically, keeping yourself within their short strike zone for a longer period of time. The logical escape vector is remarkably simple. Turn around, run in a completely straight, uninhibited line as fast as your legs can carry you, and keep running. Within 15 to 20 feet, the alligator will realize that its initial ambush has failed, give up the chase completely, and lumber back to the safety of the water. If the panic of the wild causes a companion to collapse, we must watch out for the well-meaning medical violence of myth number 15. Sticking a hard object, like a wallet, a stick, or a metal spoon, into the mouth of a person experiencing a seizure to prevent them from swallowing their tongue. This is a terrifyingly persistent piece of first aid fiction. From a basic anatomical standpoint, it is physically impossible for a human being to swallow their own tongue. The lingual frenulum, that thick band of tissue anchoring the tongue to the floor of the mouth, keeps it firmly in place. During a grand mal seizure, the muscles of the jaw contract with immense mechanical force. If you attempt to pry open their mouth and force a foreign object between their teeth, you will almost certainly splinter their jaw, break their teeth, or cause them to bite off a portion of the object, which they will then inhale directly into their trachea, causing fatal asphyxiation. The correct modern neurological response is completely non-invasive. Do not restrain the person. Do not put anything near their face. Clear the surrounding area of sharp objects. Gently roll them onto their side into the recovery position to keep their airway clear of saliva, and let the neurological storm pass naturally. If your journey takes you back to the ocean, you must understand the fluid dynamics of myth number 16. The absolute rule that swimming parallel to the shore is the only humanly possible way to escape a deadly rip current. For decades, beach signs and public safety announcements have hammered this single directive into the public consciousness. While swimming parallel is a valid strategy for a standard, localized rip current channel that flows straight out at a right angle, it completely falls apart when confronting complex coastal geology. Rip currents are highly dynamic rivers of water returning to the ocean, and they frequently flow at sharp, diagonal angles relative to the beach or form massive, rotating structural eddies. If you blindly swim parallel against a diagonal current, you are still actively fighting the massive volume of water, exhausting your energy reserves until you drown. The modern life-saving protocol is far more adaptive. First, do not panic or fight the current directly. Assess the direction of the drift. If the current is pulling you diagonally, swim perpendicular to that specific flow, even if it means swimming at an angle toward the shore. If the current is too wide or too powerful to overcome, simply flip onto your back, float calmly, and let the current carry you out past the breaking surf line where its energy naturally dissipates, allowing you to easily swim around the perimeter of the channel and return to the beach safely. Finally, we brave the freezing northern waters to dismantle myth number 17, the belief that wearing a heavy wool coat or thick survival clothing into freezing water will somehow insulate you and keep you warm longer. This is a fatal misunderstanding of aquatic thermodynamics and human buoyancy. The moment a human body hits water below 50 degrees Fahrenheit, it triggers an involuntary physiological reaction known as cold shock response, causing immediate, uncontrollable hyperventilation. Thick, heavy winter clothing does not provide insulation underwater. Instead, the porous fabric instantly absorbs water, trapping massive weight against your limbs. A heavy wool coat can easily add an extra 20 to 30 pounds of dead weight to your frame, severely restricting your range of motion and making it mechanically impossible to tread water or perform effective swimming strokes. You will burn through your remaining physical energy in a matter of seconds, causing you to slip beneath the surface and drown long before hypothermia even has a chance to drop your core temperature. If you fall into freezing water, your primary objective is maintaining buoyancy. Shed heavy, waterlogged outer gear immediately, keep your life jacket secured, and adopt the heat escape lessening position by pulling your knees tightly to your chest to conserve core warmth while waiting for rescue. We cross the threshold into the sterile, often bloody theatre of emergency medicine for Part 4, where kitchen table remedies and outdated household wisdom transform well-meaning bystanders into accidental executioners. We begin in the immediate aftermath of a fire with myth number 18, the deeply ingrained grandmotherly urge to smear butter, cooking oil, or heavy grease onto a fresh, agonizingly hot burn wound. It seems like a comforting, logical balm, a thick, slick layer to seal the raw skin away from the air and soothe the intense stinging. In reality, you are effectively frying your own flesh. When a thermal energy source cooks human skin, the tissue retains a massive amount of residual, deep-seated heat. By slapping a thick, occlusive barrier of lipids, like butter or grease, over that surface, you are creating a highly efficient thermal insulator. The butter traps that intense residual heat directly within the dermal layers, forcing the thermal energy to radiate deeper down into the healthy subcutaneous tissue, turning a superficial second-degree burn into a catastrophic, full-thickness, third-degree disaster. Furthermore, dairy butter and kitchen oils are packed with organic matter and bacteria. Rubbing them into open, compromised flesh guarantees a severe deep tissue infection that will complicate skin grafts and leave horrific, disfiguring scars. The modern medical mandate for a burn is non-negotiable. Cool the tissue immediately with ambient running tap water for at least 10 to 20 minutes to pull the thermal energy out and keep the wound clean, dry, and sterile. Leave the butter on the toast. If the emergency moves from the skin to the respiratory tract, we run right into the anatomical disaster of myth number 19, tilting your head backward during a severe nosebleed. For generations, school teachers, parents, and coaches have told bleeding children to throw their chins into the air and pinch the bridge of their nose, operating under the naive assumption that keeping the head upright prevents the blood from escaping the body. Let us trace the plumbing of the human skull. Your nasal cavities drain directly into the posterior nasopharynx, which sits right above your trachea and your esophagus. When you tilt your head back, you do not stop the bleeding. You simply redirect the flow of fluid. Instead of draining harmlessly out of your nostrils, a torrent of thick, highly irritating blood runs directly down the back of your throat. This creates an immediate choking hazard, where blood can slide into your airway and block your lungs. Even if you manage to swallow the fluid, blood is an incredibly potent gastric irritant when introduced to the stomach in large quantities. Within minutes, the presence of blood triggers severe nausea, intense abdominal cramping, and violent, uncontrollable projectile vomiting, which instantly spikes your blood pressure and causes the vessels in your nose to bleed even more aggressively. The correct, gravity-compliant protocol is exactly the opposite. Lean your head slightly forward, chin down toward your chest, allow the blood to drain out into a cloth, and apply firm, continuous pressure to the soft, lower part of your nose for a full 10 minutes to let a stable clot form naturally. Should your misadventures take you back into the coastal surf, you must avoid the infamous, highly public indignity of myth number 20, urinating on a teammate to treat a painful jellyfish sting. This bizarre piece of cultural folklore was popularized by modern television comedies, convincing millions of beachgoers that the chemical properties of human urine will instantly neutralize the agonizing venom of a marine sting. Let us examine the microscopic weapon systems of a jellyfish. Their tentacles are lined with millions of specialized, highly pressurized stinging cells called nematocysts, which act like tiny chemical-tipped harpoons. When a jellyfish brushes against your skin, thousands of these cells fire, but thousands more remain stuck to your flesh, completely unruptured and fully loaded with venom. These microscopic pods are incredibly sensitive to changes in osmotic pressure, which is the balance of solutes in the surrounding liquid. Human urine is highly variable, but it is typically a dilute, slightly acidic or alkaline solution that differs wildly from salt water. Plunging those unruptured nematocysts into urine triggers a massive osmotic shock, causing the remaining cells to instantly fracture and fire all their residual venom simultaneously directly into your bloodstream, exponentially increasing the pain, the tissue damage, and the risk of systemic shock. If you are stung by a jellyfish, skip the public urination and use real medical science. Rinse the area thoroughly with household vinegar, which chemically paralyzes the stinging cells, or submerge the limb in hot water around 104 to 110 degrees Fahrenheit, which actively breaks down and denatures the heat-sensitive proteins of the venom. Returning to the household medicine cabinet, we must dismantle the destructive cleansing ritual of myth number 21, pouring rubbing alcohol or hydrogen peroxide directly onto an open cut or scrape to sanitize it. We have all grown up watching that satisfying, white, bubbling chemical reaction, believing that the stinging sensation is proof that the medicine is working to annihilate dangerous environmental bacteria. In reality, you are witnessing a chemical massacre of your own defense systems. Hydrogen peroxide and isopropyl alcohol are highly cytotoxic compounds. They do not selectively target bacteria. Instead, they indiscriminately obliterate everything they touch, including your body's surviving white blood cells, fragile new capillaries, and healthy dermal cells that are desperately trying to knit the wound back together. The white bubbling you see is not the chemical killing germs. It is the peroxide violently destroying healthy human cells and releasing oxygen gas. By chemically scorching the interior of the wound, you delay the natural cellular healing process by several days, increase the amount of necrotic tissue that must be cleared away, and drastically elevate the likelihood of developing thick, ugly, raised keloid scars. To properly treat a standard open wound, abandon the chemical warfare. Simply flush the injury with a high-volume stream of clean, running water or sterile saline to mechanically force out debris. Apply a thin layer of petroleum jelly to keep the tissue moist and cover it with a clean bandage. If your survival scenario stretches out over weeks and you finally manage to rescue a severely malnourished, starving, or profoundly dehydrated person, you must watch out for the lethal benevolence of myth number 22, immediately presenting them with a massive, rich, celebratory feast, or forcing them to chug a giant gallon of water. It feels like the ultimate act of mercy, giving a dying person all the nutrients and fluids they have been deprived of. In reality, you are triggering a swift, terrifying metabolic cascade known as refeeding syndrome. When the human body goes without food for an extended period, it shifts into a state of conservative starvation, down-regulating its insulin production and drawing its basic energy from stored fats and proteins. When you suddenly introduce a massive influx of carbohydrates and calories into that system, it triggers an explosive, sudden spike in blood glucose levels, forcing the pancreas to dump a massive wave of insulin into the bloodstream. This rapid hormonal surge causes cells to aggressively pull essential electrolytes, specifically phosphate, potassium, and magnesium, out of the blood plasma and into the intracellular space. This sudden, catastrophic drop in serum electrolytes causes acute cardiac arrhythmias, profound muscular weakness, respiratory failure, and rapid neurological collapse that can kill the patient within hours of their first meal. A starving or severely dehydrated person must be re-warmed and re-fed with extreme clinical caution, starting with tiny, calculated microdoses of easily digestible liquids and basic electrolytes, slowly scaling up over days to allow the cellular machinery to safely recalibrate. If the trauma involves severe bleeding from a limb, we must address the tactical overreactions of myth number 23, tying a crude tourniquet tightly around an arm or a leg for any minor or moderate bleeding. The rise of modern military thrillers and survival video games has popularized the idea that the moment blood starts flowing, you should instantly tie a leather belt or a bandana around the upper limb to cut off the supply. While a proper commercial tourniquet is an absolute lifesaver for catastrophic arterial hemorrhaging where an entire limb has been mangled or severed, using it casually for standard venous bleeding is a fast way to lose a limb unnecessarily. A tightly bound tourniquet cuts off all arterial and venous blood flow to everything below the knot. This induces complete acute tissue ischemia, starving the muscles and nerves of oxygen. Within a matter of hours, irreversible cellular death and necrosis set in, turning the surviving limb into a toxic mass of dead flesh that will inevitably require surgical amputation at the shoulder or hip. Furthermore, if you release a poorly placed tourniquet after too long, you can trigger crush syndrome, dumping a fatal wave of potassium and dead cell byproducts back into the main bloodstream, causing instant kidney failure and cardiac arrest. For almost all standard lacerations, a tourniquet is completely unnecessary. You can control the vast majority of human bleeding by placing a clean cloth directly over the wound and applying firm, heavy, unyielding manual pressure with both hands for a solid 5 to 10 minutes without stopping to look. Save the tourniquet strictly for the battlefield disasters where direct pressure fails. Finally, we brave the freezing winter nights to dismantle the comfortable warmth of myth number 24, drinking a stiff shot of whiskey, brandy, or liquor to stay warm when you are shivering in the cold. It is a myth beautifully embodied by the classic images of rescue dogs carrying little barrels of alcohol around their necks. When you drink a strong alcoholic beverage in freezing weather, a distinct, immediate wave of deep, radiant heat washes over your entire torso and face. It feels magnificent, like an internal fire has been lit. But this feeling is a dangerous thermodynamic illusion caused by a physiological process known as vasodilation. Alcohol chemically forces the tiny, constricted blood vessels near the surface of your skin to wide open. Your body's natural defense against the cold is vasoconstriction, where it intentionally shuts down blood flow to the skin and limbs to keep your hot, precious blood concentrated in your vital core organs. Alcohol completely overrides this defense mechanism, rushing your warm core blood directly to the surface of your skin. While this makes your skin feel beautifully warm, that heat is being rapidly radiated away into the freezing surrounding air. Your body is effectively dumping its primary thermal reserves out into the wilderness. Your internal core temperature plunges at a terrifyingly accelerated rate, driving you deep into the deadly clutches of hypothermia, while your intoxicated brain remains blissfully unaware that you are freezing to death. When stranded in the cold, stick to hot broths, insulated layers, and physical movement. Leave the bottle behind until you are safely indoors. We transition now from the desolate, untamed wilderness into the concrete labyrinths of the concrete jungle for Part 5, where modern infrastructure and urban panic give rise to an entirely new catalogue of lethal misconceptions. We begin with a scenario that bridges nature and suburbia. Myth number 25. Diving headfirst into a swimming pool, lake, or pond to escape a furious, buzzing swarm of aggressive bees or wasps. It seems like a flawless tactical retreat. Submerging yourself beneath a protective liquid barrier where the airborne insects cannot possibly reach you. In reality, you are entering a slow-motion, claustrophobic trap. Unlike predatory animals that lose interest when a target disappears, Africanized honeybees and aggressive wasps are notoriously persistent, vengeful defenders of their territory. They will not simply fly away when you submerge. Instead, they will anchor themselves directly over your position, swarming the surface of the water in a tight, angry cloud. They are waiting for exactly one thing: the mechanical reality of human respiration. The very instant your lungs force you to break the surface to draw a frantic breath of oxygen, the swarm will immediately descend upon your exposed face, mouth, and airway, inflicting dozens of stings inside your throat, triggering rapid anaphylactic asphyxiation. Furthermore, the panic of holding your breath while being targeted can easily cause you to inhale water, leading directly to drowning. The proper, scientifically backed escape vector is to keep moving. Cover your face with your shirt, run in a completely straight line through dense brush or trees to break their visual tracking, and seek immediate refuge inside an enclosed vehicle or a building with ceiling doors. From the outdoor elements, we step into the mechanical nightmares of our architecture to address the high-altitude terror of myth number 26. Jumping upward into the air at the exact final microsecond before a malfunctioning, free-falling elevator crashes into the basement level. This is a classic piece of cartoon physics that has comforted generations of city dwellers, operating under the assumption that a well-timed leap will completely counteract the downward momentum of the falling cabin, allowing you to float gently to safety as the structure destroys itself around you. Let us apply basic Newtonian physics to this structural catastrophe. If an elevator is free-falling down a skyscraper shaft, it will rapidly accelerate toward terminal velocity. Both you and the cabin are traveling downward at an immense velocity, often exceeding 50 to 60 miles per hour. To neutralize that downward momentum with a jump, you would need to possess the explosive leg strength of an Olympic superhero, launching yourself upward with a force greater than the speed of the falling car. Mechanically speaking, human muscle tissue cannot generate anywhere near that velocity. Even if you possessed that impossible power, you would simply launch your skull directly into the collapsing steel ceiling of the elevator, breaking your neck. Furthermore, in a pitch-black, chaotic, weightless freefall, timing the exact millisecond of impact is a statistical impossibility. If you ever find yourself in this incredibly rare elevator catastrophe, abandon the jump. Your best mathematical chance of survival is to immediately lie completely flat on your back on the floor of the car, covering your face and head. Lying flat effectively distributes the immense, crushing deceleration forces evenly across your entire skeletal frame and soft internal organs, preventing your legs from compacting into your pelvis and maximizing your survival odds. If the danger shifts from mechanical failures to human hostility, you must ignore the tactical delusions of myth number 27. Ducking behind a standard automobile door to protect yourself from incoming gunfire during a street shooting. Hollywood action cinema has conditioned us to believe that a thin piece of Detroit sheet metal can magically deflect high-velocity ballistic rounds, transforming a standard family sedan into an impenetrable bunker. Let us examine the material anatomy of modern consumer vehicles. A standard car door consists of nothing more than two exceptionally thin sheets of stamped steel or aluminum, separated by a hollow internal cavity containing plastic window tracks, speaker wires, and lightweight acoustic insulation. This material profile offers absolutely zero resistance to modern ammunition. Even a low-caliber handgun round or a standard civilian rifle projectile will easily punch cleanly through both sides of a car door without losing any significant velocity, hitting whatever bystander is crouching behind it. A car door is not ballistic cover, it is merely concealment. If you are caught in a crossfire, you must seek true, substantial ballistic cover that can absorb kinetic energy. On an automobile, there are only two locations that offer this protection: the heavy, solid cast iron or aluminium engine block at the front of the vehicle, or the dense, layered steel wheels and brake assemblies at the bottom corners. Drop to the asphalt and place those dense mechanical masses directly between your body and the trajectory of the gunfire. Everything else is just painted tin. Should an urban collapse or prolonged structural disaster leave you completely stranded without utilities, you must avoid the desperate chemical suicide of myth number 28, recycling your own urine to survive severe dehydration. This myth is frequently popularized by sensationalist television personalities who claim that drinking your own fluid is a rugged, necessary survival trick when the water taps run completely dry. In reality, this is a swift way to accelerate absolute renal shutdown. Your kidneys act as the primary chemical filtration plant of the human body, working tirelessly to extract highly toxic metabolic waste products, excess minerals, urea, and heavy salts out of your bloodstream and dissolve them into a liquid waste solution to be expelled. When you are profoundly dehydrated, your body aggressively conserves water, meaning your urine becomes an exceptionally dense, highly concentrated cocktail of these exact toxins and salts. By drinking this fluid, you are forcing your already struggling kidneys to refilter the exact same toxic waste, but at double the concentration. This massive influx of salt and urea drastically spikes the osmotic pressure in your blood, which actively leaches remaining moisture away from your vital organs, doubling your rate of dehydration and triggering rapid acute uremic poisoning and permanent kidney failure. You are essentially drinking seawater wrapped in metabolic waste. Skip the urine and focus your remaining energy on harvesting ambient condensation or setting up rain catchments. If your vehicle takes a catastrophic turn off a bridge or a coastal road, you must avoid the mechanical errors of myth number 29. Attempting to shatter a submerged car window by striking it directly in the center with your fist or an object. When a vehicle plunges into deep water, the immense exterior hydrostatic pressure locks the doors firmly shut against the frame, making it physically impossible to open them until the cabin completely fills with water. Your only immediate escape vector is through the side windows. However, modern automotive side windows are constructed from specially tempered safety glass, which is engineered through rapid thermal heating and cooling cycles to be exceptionally impact-resistant. The molecular tension of tempered glass is designed to flex and absorb heavy structural shocks, particularly when those impacts are delivered to the broad, spacious center of the glass pane. If you repeatedly strike the center of the window, the glass will simply absorb the energy and bounce your object back, wasting your dwindling oxygen supply. To successfully escape, you must target the material's structural vulnerabilities. Tempered glass cannot effectively distribute stress at its rigid, anchored edges. You must use a sharp, concentrated point, such as a dedicated rescue tool, a removable metal seat headrest prong, or even the corner of a heavy belt buckle, and strike with maximum violence directly into the extreme lower corners of the window pane. This concentrated pressure will cause the internal stress lines to violently fracture, instantly shattering the entire window into thousands of tiny, harmless pebbles, opening a clean exit pathway. Returning to the daily routine of the city, we must dismantle the lingering technophobia of myth number 30, the strict warning that using a modern cellular telephone at a gas station pump can ignite airborne petroleum vapors and trigger a catastrophic explosion. For decades, giant, bold warning decals have decorated every fuel pump in the developed world, commanding drivers to extinguish their electronic devices before refueling. This myth was born in the early days of mobile technology, fueled by fears that the radio frequency emissions or the internal battery currents of early cell phones could spark a sudden electrical arc. Modern scientific entities, including the Federal Communications Commission and numerous engineering laboratories, have repeatedly attempted to detonate fuel vapors using mobile phones under extreme, idealized conditions, and have failed completely. The low-voltage radio waves emitted by your phone do not possess anywhere near the energy required to ignite petroleum gas. The true, hidden arsonist at the gas pump is not electronics. It is simple static electricity generated by human friction. The typical disaster scenario occurs when a driver initializes the automatic fuel nozzle, then steps back inside the vehicle's cabin to escape the weather. As their clothing slides across the synthetic fabric of the car seats, it acts as a massive static generator, loading the driver's body with thousands of volts of electrical potential. When they step back outside and reach directly for the metal fuel nozzle, a massive static spark leaps from their fingertip to the metal handle, instantly igniting the highly concentrated fuel vapors rising from the filler neck. Keep your phone in your pocket, but more importantly, stay outside your vehicle and touch a metal part of the car chassis away from the fuel tank to ground yourself before touching the pump. Finally, we confront the ultimate respiratory delusion of structural disasters. Myth number 31. The belief that tying a wet cloth, bandana, or t-shirt over your nose and mouth will protect you completely from the deadly smoke of a structural building fire. It is a piece of advice that has been handed down through generations of school fire drills, giving individuals a false sense of security as they prepare to brave a burning hallway. Let us evaluate the toxic chemistry of a modern fire. While it is true that a damp cloth will cool down the searing, superheated ambient air and mechanically trap large visible particles of carbon soot, it provides absolutely zero chemical filtration against the invisible killer gases that dominate modern structure fires. When modern synthetic materials, carpets, electronics, and treated woods burn, they release an exceptionally lethal cocktail of toxic gases, most notably carbon monoxide and hydrogen cyanide. Carbon monoxide binds to your hemoglobin with a tenacity over 200 times greater than oxygen, causing rapid systemic cellular suffocation, while hydrogen cyanide stops cellular respiration entirely. These microscopic gas molecules slip cleanly through the porous, waterlogged weave of a wet cloth as if it weren't even there. Relying on a wet bandana to stay inside a smoky room will simply ensure that you lose consciousness within a matter of breaths. The only reliable strategy for surviving a smoke-filled urban structure is to get as low to the floor as possible where the air is marginally cleaner, move with explosive urgency toward the nearest emergency exit, and get outside into the open air immediately. We break ground now upon the fragile architecture of the human mind and the consumer gear that exploits it for Part 6, exploring the dangerous intersection where high-tech gadgetry and psychological frailty conspire to bring about our downfall. We begin by shattering the supreme vanity of human consciousness. Myth number 32. The comfortable delusion that your rational, logical thinking processes will remain perfectly intact when you are plunged into a terrifying life or death survival crisis. We like to imagine ourselves as the calm, calculating heroes of our own internal movies, assessing options with clinical detachment when the alarms begin to blare. Neurobiology tells a far more humiliating story. The very millisecond your brain perceives an immediate existential threat, the amygdala fires an unnuanced distress signal that instantly hijacks the prefrontal cortex, the seat of higher executive functioning, logic, and long-term planning. Your system is instantly flooded with a toxic cocktail of adrenaline and cortisol, triggering a physiological cascade known as cognitive narrowing. Your field of vision physically shrinks into a literal tunnel, your auditory processing drops out, and your working memory capacity plummets to near zero. In this state of primitive, panic-induced blindness, the brain becomes completely incapable of processing complex, abstract data. Lost wanderers will repeatedly overlook glaringly obvious escape routes, throw away life-saving equipment, or engage in bizarre, repetitive, and entirely counterproductive behaviors, such as walking in tight circles or shedding their clothes in the freezing cold due to paradoxical undressing. Survival is not a battle of intellect. It is a battle against your own primitive nervous system, and unless you have drilled your survival movements to the level of muscle memory, your conscious brain will betray you the moment the shadows lengthen. This psychological vulnerability is often amplified by a misplaced faith in consumer gear, leading us directly into the freezing trap of myth number 33, the belief that a lightweight metallic space blanket or mylar emergency blanket is all you need to sleep safely and comfortably directly on frozen ground. These shiny sheets of plastic look like space-age magic, and their packaging proudly boasts that they reflect up to 90% of your radiant body heat back toward you. So, the uninsulated survivor wraps themselves up like a baked potato and lies down on the frozen earth, expecting a warm, protected night. By midnight, they are shivering uncontrollably, on the verge of clinical hypothermia due to a fundamental misunderstanding of thermodynamics. Heat moves through three distinct mechanisms: radiation, convection, and conduction. While a mylar blanket is highly efficient at bouncing back radiant heat waves traveling through the air, it possesses near-zero structural thickness, meaning it offers absolutely no resistance to conduction. Conduction is the direct transfer of thermal energy between two solid objects in physical contact. The solid earth beneath you acts as an infinite frozen thermal sink. The very moment your heavy body presses that thin sheet of plastic against the damp soil or snow, your core body heat is violently and rapidly leached out of your torso and into the ground. To survive a freezing night, the airspace beneath you is infinitely more critical than the airspace above you. You must construct a thick, dense, highly insulated barrier using pine boughs, dry leaves, or structural pack gear at least 6 inches deep to break that conductive circuit. Otherwise, the earth will simply drain your life away through the bottom of your sleeping bag. This reliance on external tools grows even more perilous when we examine the digital dependencies of myth number 34, relying entirely upon a modern GPS unit or a commercial smartphone for wilderness navigation. We live in an era where the entire sum of human cartography is accessible via a glass screen in our pockets, fostering a dangerous illusion of invulnerability. Tens of thousands of casual hikers step onto remote trails every weekend with nothing more than a fully charged phone and a mapping app to guide them. This is a digital death trap. Commercial smartphones are delicate electronic consumer devices engineered for climate-controlled urban environments. They are spectacularly ill-equipped for the physical realities of the backcountry. The moment the ambient temperature drops near freezing, the chemical reactions inside modern lithium-ion batteries slow down dramatically, causing the battery indicator to instantly plummet from 80% to 0, shutting the device down completely without warning. Furthermore, deep wilderness canyons, heavy forest canopies, and regional atmospheric anomalies frequently block or distort satellite signals, leaving your location icon frozen or spinning erratically. If you drop the device onto a hard rock or submerge it in a stream crossing, your entire navigational lifeline is instantly transformed into a useless slab of shattered glass and plastic. If you step past the trailhead without a physical analog topographic map, a dependable fluid-filled magnetic compass, and the actual manual skill required to calculate a bearing, you are effectively volunteering to become a permanent statistic. Should your digital lifelines fail, and you find yourself truly missing, your loved ones at home might fall victim to the bureaucratic tragedy of myth number 35, the widespread belief that you must wait a full 24 to 48 hours before reporting a missing person to the police or search and rescue authorities. This is a deeply pervasive piece of fiction derived entirely from mid-century television crime dramas, where gritty detectives refuse to take a case until a clock has ticked down. In the real world of search and rescue, there is absolutely no waiting period for missing persons, and enforcing one is a catastrophic error. The initial hours following a separation, known among professional rescue coordinators as the golden hours, are absolutely critical to the survival of the lost subject. During this initial window, the search area is mathematically small, the lost individual is usually still mobile, rational, and uninjured, and environmental exposure has not yet begun to break down their physical systems. As the clock ticks past 12, 24, and 48 hours, the potential search grid expands exponentially based on walking speed, tracking signs decay due to wind and weather, and the subject's cognitive status degrades, making them less likely to respond to search calls. If a companion fails to return from the wilderness at their designated time, pick up the telephone immediately. Every single second of delay drastically reduces the probability of a successful recovery operation. If you are stranded for days, your thoughts will inevitably turn to water purification, bringing us to the chemical oversights of myth number 36, the absolute rule that boiled water is immediately 100% safe to drink in any conceivable scenario. We have had it hammered into our brains since childhood that if you bring water to a rolling boil for a few minutes, you have successfully neutralized the threat. Let us clarify the exact scope of thermal purification. Boiling water is an exceptionally effective method for destroying biological contaminants. The intense heat completely denatures and kills bacteria, viruses, and living protozoa like Giardia and Cryptosporidium. However, boiling is completely powerless against non-biological toxins. If the water source you are harvesting from has been contaminated by modern industrial runoff, mining operations, heavy metals like arsenic, lead or mercury, agricultural pesticides, or radioactive isotopes, boiling the liquid actually achieves the exact opposite of your intent. As the water boils, a significant portion of the pure liquid escapes into the air as steam, which heavily concentrates the remaining toxic chemical compounds and heavy metals within the pot. You are effectively brewing a dense, highly toxic chemical soup. Before you trust a water source, you must look upstream. If you are near an active mining site, an industrial zone, or an agricultural field, thermal boiling will not save you from acute chemical poisoning. If a rescue plane or commercial helicopter finally passes high above your position, you must avoid the frantic overconfidence of myth number 37, assuming that firing a handheld signal flare will always guarantee that the pilots will spot you. It seems like a logical assumption. A bright, burning crimson light cutting through the sky should be impossible to miss. In reality, the cockpit of a modern aircraft, traveling at hundreds of miles per hour, is a highly restrictive visual environment. Pilots are intensely focused on instruments, flight trajectories, and avoiding terrain, and their field of peripheral vision through the small glass windows is remarkably narrow. A small point source signal flare, burning for a mere 30 seconds on a vast, textured green forest canopy, or a bright desert floor, is incredibly easy to miss unless the pilot happens to be looking directly at your exact coordinate at the precise microsecond of detonation. Passive, high-contrast, macro-scale signaling is often far more effective over time. Construct massive geometric distress signals on the ground using highly contrasting materials, such as giant 3:1 ratio letters spelling out X or SOS, using dark logs on white snow or bright rocks on dark soil. Utilize a simple glass signaling mirror to flash raw sunlight directly at the aircraft's cockpit. The concentrated beam of a mirror can be seen for up to 20 miles and creates a blinding, unmistakable flash that naturally commands a pilot's attention. Finally, we address the delicate, intimate realities of extended survival with the hygienic dangers of myth number 38. The casual assumption that any patch of soft green moss or random leaves gathered from the forest floor makes for perfectly safe emergency toilet paper. When nature calls in the deep backcountry, the uninitiated city dweller will casually reach for the nearest leafy green cluster without a second thought. This is a game of botanical Russian roulette. The wilderness is packed with highly toxic, oil-bearing flora, specifically engineered to inflict severe allergic dermatitis on human tissue. Wiping sensitive mucosal membranes with the invisible, resilient urushiol oils of poison ivy, poison oak, or poison sumac will trigger an agonizing, blistering inflammatory response within 24 hours, completely incapacitating you and making movement an absolute impossibility due to the pain. Furthermore, the low-lying mosses and leaf litters of the forest floor are primary breeding grounds for microscopic parasites, biting mites, ticks, and fecal bacteria left behind by wild animals. Introducing these biological hazards directly into microabrasions in your skin guarantees a severe, localized infection or systemic parasitic invasion. Before you reach for nature's restroom accessories, you must possess absolute, flawless botanical identification skills, or better yet, stick to smooth, clean riverstones, dry bark from non-toxic trees, or snow. We arrive at the final frontier of our survival re-education for Part 7, where we confront the last remaining bastions of cultural folklore and stitch together the singular, ultimate truth of human endurance. We begin by dismantling the dangerously romantic ecological philosophy of myth number 39, the absolute rule that if you observe a wild animal or a bird consuming a specific berry or mushroom, it is perfectly safe for human consumption. It feels beautifully intuitive, a sort of natural endorsement from the local woodland inhabitants who must surely know the secrets of their own habitat. Let us expose the deep evolutionary divides of biochemistry. The animal kingdom operates on completely different physiological software than Homo sapiens. A woodland squirrel, a wild deer, or a common bird can happily munch on highly toxic flora and fungi because their digestive tracts and liver enzymes have spent millions of years evolving specific, highly targeted metabolic pathways to neutralize those exact poisons. Consider the genus Amanita, which includes the notorious death cap mushroom. A forest rodent can digest a death cap with absolutely zero health issues due to an advanced internal resistance to alpha-amanitin. If a human being ingests that exact same mushroom based on the rodent's recommendation, those exact same toxins will instantly bypass our basic defenses, binding directly to our RNA polymerase enzymes. Within 48 hours, your liver and kidneys will undergo complete, irreversible cellular necrosis, causing fatal multi-organ failure that no modern medical intervention short of an immediate organ transplant can stop. Unless you possess an advanced degree in field botany, treat every unknown wild plant like a loaded weapon. Shifting back from the toxic flora to the violent physical traumas of the trail, we must halt the immediate panic of myth number 40, the frantic instinct to immediately yank a knife, a sharp branch, or a jagged piece of metal out of a deep puncture wound. It is a profoundly human reaction to want the foreign object out of your body as quickly as possible, a desperate urge to clean the injury and stop the immediate visual violation. By pulling that blade or stick out on the trail, you are effectively pulling the trigger on your own execution. When a sharp object penetrates deep into human muscle and tissue, it cuts through an intricate network of highly pressurized arteries and veins. However, as long as the weapon remains embedded in the flesh, its physical structure acts as a tight, mechanical plug. The object itself is actively tamponading the bleeding, compressing the severed blood vessels against the surrounding tissue and holding the catastrophic hemorrhage in check. The precise moment you pull that object out, you uncork the dam. Arterial blood pressure will instantly force a torrent of vital fluid out of the vessels, causing rapid, uncontrollable internal and external hemorrhaging that can drain your vascular system in less than 60 seconds. The modern tactical combat casualty protocol is non-negotiable. Leave the object completely alone. Stabilize it exactly where it sits using bulky dressings, taped bandages, or rolled clothing to prevent it from shifting, and transport the victim with extreme care to a sterile operating room where a surgeon can safely clamp the arteries the moment the object is removed. From localized bleeding, we expand our view to the global furnace of myth number 41, the hubristic belief that you can successfully outrun a rapidly advancing forest fire or wildfire if you are athletic and fast enough. We have all seen the dramatic news footage and cinematic blockbusters where heroes sprint just ahead of a wall of flames, escaping by the skin of their teeth. This is a terrifying underestimation of wildfire physics. A mature, wind-driven wildfire does not crawl across the forest floor. It moves with the terrifying velocity of a predatory locomotive. Driven by localized weather systems created by its own intense heat, a wildfire can easily advance at speeds exceeding 15 to 20 miles per hour, outpacing an Olympic sprinter over rough terrain and easily overtaking an automobile trapped on a winding mountain road. Worse yet, wildfires do not advance in a neat, predictable line. The intense updrafts loft millions of burning embers miles ahead of the main front, igniting secondary spot fires that instantly cut off your escape routes and trap you inside natural geographical funnels like canyons and ridges. Even if the flames have not reached your physical coordinates yet, the fire is actively killing you from hundreds of yards away. A major wildfire consumes millions of cubic feet of oxygen every second, replacing the atmosphere with superheated toxic gases like carbon monoxide and hydrogen cyanide at temperatures exceeding 800 degrees Fahrenheit. Inhaling this air just once will instantly scorch your respiratory tract, causing your lungs to fill with fluid and suffocating you long before the actual fire touches your skin. If you see smoke on the horizon, do not wait to measure its speed. Evacuate immediately along established routes because nature's furnace cannot be outrun. This brings us to the final, all-encompassing delusion of the survival industry. Myth number 42. The belief that wilderness survival is entirely a game of raw physical strength, bulging muscles, elite athletic conditioning, and brute force. The modern media landscape is saturated with hyper-masculine images of tactical experts with veins popping, lifting heavy logs, and wrestling the elements into submission through sheer physical dominance. While physical fitness is undoubtedly a valuable asset, treating it as the primary pillar of survival is a profound psychological error. Historical search and rescue logs are filled with tragic stories of elite athletes, marathon runners, and military veterans who perished within days of becoming lost, while young children, elderly individuals, and unconditioned novices survived against impossible odds. Survival is not a physical competition. It is a mental and psychological chess match. The absolute dominant factor in life or death endurance is situational awareness and cognitive flexibility. The ability to look a terrifying new reality in the face, abandon your preconceived notions, and adapt your behavior to the environment rather than trying to force the environment to adapt to you. This is anchored by what psychologists call the deliberate will to live. When panic sets in, the physically strong can exhaust their energy reserves in a matter of hours through frantic, uncalculated movements. The survivor is the one who can master their own nervous system, sit completely still in the dark, accept their predicament without despair, and make small, calculated, rational decisions one step at a time. As we close the ledger on these 42 survival myths, the grand, philosophical conclusion becomes starkly apparent. The ultimate, most lethal survival tool on planet Earth does not arrive in a glossy cardboard box from a tactical supply store. It isn't a custom-forged survival knife, a high-tech magnesium fire starter, or a beautifully illustrated Boy Scout manual. The greatest survival tool you possess sits directly between your ears. A calm, disciplined, unnuanced human mind that is completely free of dangerous cultural myths and cinematic delusions. Mother Nature is not a malicious entity out to hunt you down, nor is she a benevolent mother waiting to coddle your instincts. She is an entirely indifferent, unyielding system governed by the cold laws of physics, chemistry, and biology. When you step past the boundaries of our comfortable, neon-lit civilization, your survival depends entirely upon your willingness to see the wild exactly as it is, rather than how it was packaged for you by Hollywood. Now that we have stripped away the comforting lies and re-engineered your survival instincts from the ground up, I want to hear from you. Drop a comment below and let me know exactly which of these 42 myths shocked your common sense the most, and which one you were most likely to fall for out on the trail. If you want to keep your cognitive edge sharp and ensure you are never caught dead following outdated advice, smash that subscribe button, hit the notification bell, and share this guide with anyone you care to keep breathing. Until next time, stay smart, question the folklore, and keep your head clear out there.